Hi everyone, my name is Sanaya. I make music as Sandunes. I'm a musician and a producer based out of Mumbai in India. And I studied at Point Blank in London in 2011. I did their music production and sound engineering diploma course. And today I am going to take you through one of my tracks from my most recent album called Downstream. We're just going to delve into the creative approach on the project, the conceptual approach, and then the technical approach. So my approach with this whole album was to change my process around a little bit. I had been programming a lot of music and I wanted to go back to a more traditional sense of production where I was recording musicians, but in actual fact I was playing the role of all those musicians in my studio. And that gave me a lot of freedom to actually reconnect with playing out all of the different parts that encompass this track, but also give me a lot of freedom to sample myself and treat the process as something that felt more like being a musician and less like being a producer. Okay, so this is the project file for my track Crystal Pink. There's quite a bit of audio, and it's not a super heavy project. I have grouped some stuff, and most of my drums are MIDI. And this is what the song sounds like. The first thing that I did was build a master drum rack, and this was super helpful for me because I ended up using it for a bunch of different songs, and I collected samples from a whole bunch of places that felt good to me. And it was easy because I didn't have to keep going to different sources to find a bank of samples. This became my sample bank, and Ableton's hot swap function is super useful to build something like this pretty quickly. So if I open up the this little MIDI clip, um, and I'm just gonna solo the drums for a second. You have basically, I have about 3 kicks. Oops. Which kind of felt nice to not use a single kick and have a little bit of movement with the tone of the different kicks. I used a bunch of different claps and snares and yeah, different sort of sounding snares from different drum machines, different sample banks. I tried to emulate a drummer. In the verse section of the song, I had a lot of hats. I'm really taken by 16th note trap hats right now, so that was kind of what was going on. I feel like it just helped to create some momentum. And then in what would be traditionally the chorus part of the song, I switched out of the hats and I have that ride. I've definitely thrown in some tuned toms towards the end of the track, more for like melodic appeal. Got an increasing automation on the reverb send on this tom, and that little textural thing comes back in. What was really helpful was to keep it all in one MIDI clip, but sometimes that can become a nightmare to mix because I personally really don't like pulling in my plugins into each like into the same MIDI channel. It confuses me. So I basically grouped these drums. And what that means is I went into Ableton's drum rack and went to the chain view. And in the chain view, I selected all of the kicks that I was using and just right clicked and grouped all the kicks, right clicked and grouped all the snares, all the hi hats, and then created audio channels in my arrange view, where in the input type you select the MIDI channel that the input is coming from, and you select, like for example, my kick group, which I have deactivated from the chain view by unclicking this yellow button, is now activated as an audio clip by clicking on in, and it was a much easier way to just sort of organize my thoughts on how I was mixing my kick, my snare, and so on and so forth. Cool. So the bass, I made the bass mostly on my Node. I treated this as one would record a bass player. Instead of programming parts, I kind of just had a few plays, chose the best take, and then even within the take, I've like selected sections that have worked. So I didn't actually play out section by section, but I kind of just played, chose a take, and then cut and chopped and sampled myself basically. There isn't actually any automation, really speaking. I think if I remember correctly, I actually played this out and didn't have MIDI information being sent to the synth, just because sometimes less is more, and especially with sound design, there's so much that you can do that it kind of becomes an endless world. So I have wanted to restrict myself as much as possible. And I do have a pretty heavy sidechain. I usually use Ableton's glue compressor for sidechaining, but I went for some reason with the regular compressor and I sidechained it to the actual kick. The cool thing I find about recording a lot of analog equipment is that somehow in the final mix it requires a lot less tweaking. And I don't know what it is about maybe my process or VSTs in general, which have in the past required a lot more EQing from my end. I just found it much easier to work with tracks where the drums were already in tune and the synths were just outboard gear, and it was definitely more of a raw approach, but something that really worked for this kind of sound that I was going for. Kind of the main sort of essence of the track is in this this synth loop, which I recorded on my Prophet. What I did was I segregated sections of the track with the same chords pretty much, but effectively in the first half of the song, it's just pads. The chords are kind of giving the mids and the high mids all of the meat that the track needed. In the second section, I went into these stabs. And again, you can see in my sample editor that I have only used chunks, and I've actually warped the audio here. I have also used the sample transpose or the clip transpose on this track, on this clip. So that's down an octave, and then when you hear it in its regular pitch, and I went with texture as the mode. Usually I use Complex Pro if it's a synth, but this just worked a lot better. And I kind of use this approach of selecting bits from larger chunks that I played out for all of the synth stuff. So the actual process of putting down all of the melodic and harmonic information was a lot of fun, because it basically was me jamming over the track. So laying out the synths, and when I had a vague structure in place for all of the leads and for all of the different parts that I have coming in. It was basically my selecting a chunk of what was working out of the section that I had jammed on, and then kind of using it as different audio samples. So I'll just play all the synths. So for this this kind of trying to be a Rhodes sound, I used the Roland JDXI because I don't have access to a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer. But I had to whack a few things on this synth to get it to sound the way I wanted it to sound. That was the only time that I used that particular synth. All the rest of the effects and all the rest of the leads or the arps or whatever you want to, the interesting bits of audio are pretty much all Nord and Prophet. And again, they're all live plays, so I'll just make you listen to a few of them in isolation. And I kind of wanted to use a whole bunch of different textures and a whole bunch of different synth sounds, including this very cheesy sort of Herbie Hancock inspired lead-ish line. And they're all used to add different texture. They all kind of use as samples. They don't, a lot of them don't come back. And then I have this section, which effectively is and because I played this out free and I wasn't quite bang on time, I actually quantized the audio. I just warped it and I selected this section of it, and I chose an amount, and I quantized that, and then I layered it with a bunch of different sounds. So for a second, I'm just going to look at the automations in this track, which mostly are automations of the auto filter. I prefer not to use fades to have stuff coming in and out. I just feel like the like filtering things in sounds better than actually automating the volume. A lot of the entry of different parts is determined by, you can see the frequency on this filter increasing. I've automated track bands in some tracks. I've automated reverb sends. I found that a really easy way to make things sit together, so that when I was playing stuff out, I was focused solely on playing it all out, and then when I was trying to make an arrangement and build something cohesive out of it all, I was using a lot of automation to get it to sit together. And I did that as a compositional or an arrangement process, and I kept it different from the mix process, just so that I had an arrangement ready before I actually got into EQing and compression and leveling stuff out. In my project file, I have 3 send tracks actually, or insert tracks. On one of them is just a delay, and I've used the Waves H delay. On the second one, I've got my reverb. I'm using Valhalla's vintage verb. And the third one is like a parallel compression. I'm using the LA2A. I use a combination of inserts and sends, kind of play around maybe with the amount that I'm sending in different tracks. So I've done all of that via automation. And I don't so much play around with the volumes of the actual return tracks. I mix them in and then will leave them where they are. I know a lot of people automate volumes, and I've found that avoiding doing that has been helpful because it's just easier to mix. When I finally got into the arrangement process, I did that in the arrange page, and a really useful way to do that for me has been to create my sounds and my pockets of sound in the sessions view, and then literally hit record, and in the arrange page kind of record the actual arrangement. So you're doing it live, and what gets recorded is also any of the automation that you might have mapped to any MIDI controllers, and you have the freedom and flexibility to toggle around with a bunch of different ideas. And once I was done with the composition and the arrangement, and I was pretty satisfied with all the parts in the track, I was ready to mix it. And what I did was and what I usually do is I start with my kick, and I always let that be the determining start point and build from there. So if we look at what I've got going on this audio track, where there is no audio, but as you can see, I'm routing my kick from my MIDI channel through through the chain view on the drum rack itself, routing it into this audio channel. I I kept a lot of plugins on, and then would audition them and check them against each other. So what I've got going on my kick track is a lot of Slate Digital. I absolutely love these plugins, and I'm really happy with them at the moment. Nothing too extreme, just a little bit of compression. I've used the FG116, the CS EQ, and I've given it a little bit of drive with the FG76. So, and then I would add on top of that. So I always go kick, snare, hats, percussion, try and get my drums sounding really good. So I'll just take you through what's on each channel at the moment. I definitely have EQ'd my snares. I'm using Plugin Alliance Mag EQ. Nope, not using Slate Digital here. Using Waves LA2A, and using this awesome Brainworks saturation plugin. And I just think it helps to give it a lot of presence without compromising on too much headroom. And I have used FabFilter's Pro C on my ride. My mix process in general is pretty intuitive. I don't have a pattern of what plugins I use on what kinds of sounds. On the bass channel, I've got an auto filter, actually literally working to, effectively being used as an EQ, only in places where I've wanted the high end to kind of peek through. I've sort of automated it and let it come in. Apart from that, I've got Ableton's compressor, and I've used Slate Digital again. I keep going back to this FG73 for a bit of drive, and this is also really cool, the CS Lift. So I've definitely given it a little bit of high end. Coming to the sounds from the Prophet, all the meat of this track really. I've used the Fab Filter C2, and I have used Valhalla's Vintage Verb, which again, I've probably used it both as an insert as well as a send. I think I use it as an insert to kind of be a part of the actual sound, not be used as an effect really, and then as a send when I wanted to make it sound like more reverb. And I've used Brainworks' Stereo Maker just to create a little bit more stereo width. Then that brings me to all of the space creating arps and blips and bloops and funky sort of keyboard parts really. Um, I I only grouped this bunch of leads together for clarity of vision, but I've mixed each of these separately. So different bunch of things on this channel. I've only got a native compressor. I've got auto filters. So I've got on this channel with this bell lead, I've got um, a bunch of things happening. Again, Valhalla, Vintage Verb. I like this now sort of preset, and yeah, this is also a great compressor. Slate Digital is a really good option when you want things that are gentle and that give you a lot of space to. I think the only plugins that I found myself feeling inspired to boost things, and it's not such a bad thing. Coming to the what I've called the effects here as well, I haven't put anything on the whole group, but I've grouped these tracks separately. In general, when I'm getting my track ready to be bounced down, Once I'm happy with all the leveling and all the space, then I always look at the metering in the sessions view over here. So actually, it's good to check in a noisier part of the track, so maybe whatever the chorus is or the drop. So what I have been using on my master channel is I've recently started using the Slate Digital FGX, and this has allowed me to add a lot more volume or amplitude without really losing any punch. I don't usually master my own music. I got this music mastered at POB Audio in Manchester, and I was really happy with the and I'm always really happy with the idea of giving the track away to get mastered. But if I have to do a rough master and or if I have to master my stems, I always use this plugin, or at least I always have for the last 4 or 5 months or so. Yeah, that was Crystal Pink, and that's how I made it. Hope that you enjoyed this masterclass and that it was useful. And for all of the information that you need about Point Blank, their online courses, their courses at London and in LA, go to pointblankmusicschool.com. And my music is on the internet as Sandunes Music on SoundCloud, Bandcamp, iTunes, Spotify. And the album is called Downstream, so make sure you go download it and have a listen.